I like salad. Do you like salad?
Hi, I'm Hostion Ho. I'm living in Vancouver, BC, Canada, unceded territory of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. I am an immigrant to Canada from China.
Hey everyone, I'm Andrea coming to you from Victoria, but more importantly known as unceded Akwesasne territory of the Lekwungen speaking peoples, the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations, and I am an immigrant from the United States of America. And you're listening to
Canadian salad.
Canadian salad. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome to this lovely episode that Hoshin and I are gracing you with our lovely presence. How are you, Hoshin?
We're going to shower you.
Yes.
We'll shower you with our wisdom and knowledge.
Vast buckets of knowledge and wisdom coming from these two heads. Yeah.
So if you need to be grateful for something today, grateful for us. For this episode.
Yeah.
Be grateful.
And we are definitely grateful for you. Honestly, we are trying to expand our podcast out. And so we can't do that without all of you. So thank you for inviting us into your heads, your homes, your cars, your ride to work, wherever you're listening to us.
Yes. And leave a comment. Please recommend us to your friends, because we really want to get this out to, more listeners. Today, what are we going to talk about today, Andrea?
We are going to talk about patriotism and the pride of immigrant Canadians. ...
Ooh.
Is it a question? Is there pride amongst immigrant Canadians that come here and kind of explore? It's one of these, I feel a theme has been going on with us lately, Hoshin, these identity pieces. But I think that is the experience. I think we all come from different countries that have a different expression of what patriotism looks like. And how do you navigate that when you're in a new country?
I agree. No, I mean, this patriotism, like our relationship to, like, let's have us to talk about land, our relationship to our land, to our surrounding, to our passport, to our so-called nations, of course, have a very important influence on us in terms of how we see ourselves and how we see ourselves in the world. So yes, those are the themes I've been exploring. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. Well, Hoshin, I would love for you to share what patriotism maybe is for you. Maybe kind of go back to your country of origin back in China, what that looked like for you, and maybe what that looks like here now that you're in Canada.
Well, patriotism for me, to start with, I often first time I think of that word was nationalism, which also in general is like a negative word for me. And also in current kind of political climate, that is something that I immediately think of. And if we go back to my country of origin, which is China, in China, patriotism is taught, obviously, is very heavily embedded in our education. Like every Monday, I believe when we go to school, that every Monday we have like a ceremony to raise the national flag and sing the national song. So everyone in the country knows this national song. And it's like do that weekly. And then you praise the government, obviously. And then you cannot say anything otherwise, especially with nowadays with a stricter kind of censorship happening in China and social media as well. And I see it as like this tool that government have been using, not just China, I would say, this tool that government have been using to control people. And if we talk about Canada, that's a different story for me because I choose to come here. I won't necessarily say I'm a patriotic person towards Canada. I do enjoy and love Canada in many ways because it gave me a lot of things that I did not have when I was living in China. It offered me a place, and I'm privileged enough to become a citizen. They offer many safeties and many rights that I was denied when I was living in other places. And for me, also living in Canada, for me, is not necessarily the government, nor which I also explored last episode, actually, the same conversation, I guess. For me, is not the land, not the political body, it's the people. It's the environment, it's the communities that I get to assist with. For me, that was what Canada means to me. It's not that passport I hold, not that border I cross. So that is, and if that's patriotism to me, then yes, then maybe I am.
Sure. Yeah.
But for me, it's never political nor
Yeah.
nationalistic. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's my take on it.
Yeah. Well, would you say living in China that your present understanding of patriotism could only really be defined by knowing what maybe more of an extreme or nationalistic kind of perspective was? Like without that, would you be able to kind of see it where you are now? Or
Maybe. I think that is a great way to put it, actually. I didn't think of that before, but I think of course, most of my education or my understanding of loving a country like you have to, because that's the education I got. You have to love your country because in China, the narrative is always, oh, this country gives you safety. This country was at war before, but now we're at peace because of this country. And you can have a home, you can have an income, you can have your life. It's because this country gives it to you. So you should devote yourself completely to this country and love it and defend it any way you can. So that's kind of the narrative
right.
that I have been have been
Yeah.
fed. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would also say, like, and then again, I also lived in the US for a while, especially in the South,
Yeah.
right? I
Oh
think that
gosh.
there also have people there also really love their country. Like really. You see American flag, like everywhere you go,
Yeah,
which
and it's
is
all over like on shorts, your hats, there's American flag
If
bras,
everywhere,
there's
like
posters.
I do not remember in China we have that many Chinese flags. So if we really talk about like patriotism, I think, the state's definitely one of,
On the top
representation.
for
Yeah,
sure.
about
For
patriotism.
sure.
So living in China, living in the States definitely gives me that very extreme narrative of what
Sure.
patriotism means, I guess.
Hmm.
So now that I come to Canada is very different because Canadians can outwardly talk about, oh, Canada is not, that
Hmm.
they talk about all things about Canada. And I don't think people really put Canadian flags on anything.
Yeah,
Not
yeah,
as
definitely.
often, at least.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've seen moments where they have. I mean, the trucker convoys a few years ago when people were
Yeah.
protesting vaccines. And so it was a sense of identity to have this flag and I'm going to resist. Um,
Hmm.
but I really identify with what you're saying because growing up in the States, yes, patriotism, that is, if you are not a patriot, you are anti-American. You're something
Oh,
else, right? And
yeah.
I grew up saying the Pledge of Allegiance every day in school. You know, we had the flag at the front of the classroom, and so we
Same.
and so we'd put our hand over our heart and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I grew up in church, a Western evangelical church, and the American flag was all over the church.
Hmm.
It was
Hmm.
on the pulpit with the pastor right next to the Christian flag. That flags are another thing. I just, anyway, so this was very much ingrained in me. You know, there was a big uproar when a lot of like violent crimes were happening from the police force to the Black community and people of color. There were, and his name is escaping me, but he took a knee during the national
Oh,
anthem. Yeah. I
oh,
don't know if you
his
remember
name.
hearing about
Yeah, I
that,
remember
but
him. Yes.
yes.
What is his name?
Yeah. All that to say. So, and everyone deemed him the most unpatriotic because he wouldn't stand and put his hand over his heart during the national anthem. She was taking a knee, which there's been research and there's been lots of op-ed pieces that come out and say that that's the most respectful thing you could actually do during the national anthem if you disagree. So it is embedded in U.S. identity. It's definitely become much more nationalistic patriotism. So we'll get into the differences. But I think to your point, coming to Canada, I already had this negative idea or opinion of patriotism. And I was like, oh, patriot, no way. I'm not. I actually pride myself on being the worst patriot. I feel weird singing a song to a country. I feel weird standing for a flag. You know, there's just these elements that I was raised with that now I see how the structure of that country and the way that it was made and the way that it operates and the way that it keeps people down, that that's not something I want to be proud of. And so I do disassociate myself from any type of pride or patriotism when it comes to the States and even Canada. I wrestle with it.
Yeah, I actually have a question. Like, I understand, like, the states had you have your United States, so you have many states. Do you, I mean,
Sorry.
and
The term united is so funny. It's just a funny word. It's kind of like just real quick, it's kind of like trying to market like, oh, this the United States. It's not, they're not divided. No, 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 no. Don't worry about it. We are united. Like it's just trying to convince the masses otherwise. Anyway, what was your
Yeah.
question?
Yeah, well, question is, do you think is it because you have many states? Of course, every state have their legislation in many as to many aspects of their society. Do you think that
Mhm.
patriotism is just also a tool for the government to kind of again unite
Yes,
all the
for sure.
states?
For sure. Yes, for sure. It's kind of the one thread that kind of keeps us together. But it is assimilation.
Mm-hmm.
Patriotism is assimilation. Researching for this episode, I actually found that there's actually been quite a few studies between Canada and America and those different types of patriotisms. So getting into patriotism, though, I want to make sure that we clarify the difference between patriotism and nationalism, because both
Yes, I
you
have
and I
a
use those.
yeah.
Yeah, right.
I
And
often
so,
think they're the
yeah,
same. Yeah, I often
they mm,
kind of use them, interchangeably.
they definitely overlap for sure.
Yeah.
I think there's some intersections there. So there's a great article. It's from the International Journal of Intercultural Relations. It came out in 2019. And so the way
Okay.
that they define patriotism is that patriotism reflects a positive, effective attachment to one's country, marked with love and maybe pride, but, and this is key, also recognizes the potential fallibility of the nation. So it's saying, patriotism is like, I'm really happy and I'm proud of where I'm from.
Mm-hmm.
And I also recognize that this nation that I'm proud of has a lot of faults. It's
Mm-hmm.
going to make
Mm-hmm.
mistakes. Like it's not perfect, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the distinction that we need to keep in mind when we talk about nationalism. So nationalism, as they define it, is beliefs of national superiority and dominance over other nations. Right?
Oh,
Like my
okay.
country's the best.
Best. And
This
do
is
no
the
wrong.
can do no wrong. There is no potential of it being fallible. It's
Yeah.
not going to make mistakes. Whatever comes out of the country comes out, and I see this with American exceptionalism. Like America is exceptional because of this and that, but there's no room to
Yeah.
criticize, right?
The
And
greatest country of the on in the world of
yeah,
the
and I
world.
get
Yeah.
kickback, yeah, from family members, from friends who are just like, why are you so against America? And it's like I'm actually, because I care about this
That's why
country
I
that I came
criticize it.
from,
Yeah.
that's why I criticize it.
I agree.
So, and there are
Understandably so.
times where and maybe you have experienced this, where you might think of China, you might think of maybe where you grew up, and you're just like, oh, China, like
I
that's
know.
right. Like there's a
Ye-
fondness there. There's still
Yeah.
an attachment there, even though there are things that maybe you're not proud about. There still is
Mm-hmm.
that attachment. And so patriotism, that's where I want to camp. There's two different kinds, actually. So there's blind patriotism, and this is all within that paper. There's blind patriotism, and then there is constructive patriotism.
Mm-hmm.
So blind patriotism is basically this idea. It's kind of like a type of nationalism where you can do no wrong. There's nothing I'm going to critique. I'm just proud. I'm proud to be Canadian, or I'm proud to be Chinese. I'm proud to be American. But this blind patriotism actually can create perceived threats, this type of othering, right? Because I'm so
Uh,
proud, then anything different is a
it's
threat.
other. It's
It's
the
other.
other.
It's other.
Yeah.
And I don't like it. And that's not a part of us. That's not a part of the in
Mm-hmm.
group. That's not a patriot.
Yeah.
Um,
It's that
so
famous saying from Bush. Either you're with us or against us.
yes, yeah. And it's this zero sum game, right? You can't be in between. You can't actually hold constructive criticism and devotion in the same breath. Also, blind patriotism predominantly are people who have anti-immigrant views, of course, have more
Mm-hmm.
blind patriotism. Constructive patriotism, though, is different. So, constructive patriotism is this idea that I recognize and I'm proud of this country, but I also am critical of it because I want to make it better, because I see the faults in it, but I still believe and I am still proud that I can make these changes. So there was an interview done on National Public Radio. It's a U.S. Platform, and the question was, "What does patriotism mean to you as an immigrant?" And so I want to read this one quote. Quote, "I'm an immigrant to this country, and one of the things that struck me about America, just decide this is an American immigrant." Resume quote, "When I started living in is how easily Americans accepted the idea that their country was the best country in the world. And what does it really mean for America to be the number one country in the world? Does it mean that it has the best healthcare system? Does it mean that it's achieved the most perfect record on human rights ever? So to me, that's what patriotism means. It means to question rather than to accept the answer." And I love that definition. I love that. Absolutely. Because that is the framework of, you can be proud, but can you be proud and say things need to be better, right? That we're not just accepting the answer, but we're actually challenging it with questions, and asking why. Why is it this way? Why can't it be something else?
Yeah. I think the idea of just think that you are the best is very dangerous, because it really limits any room for growth, or limits the grace or the forgiveness for yourself if ever you make a mistake. I think for a country, of course, it's very dangerous, not to mention also for a person. So I think that kind of ideology should never just exist if we do truly want a country or a person to be better, to be good in general.
Yeah. That's so well said. That's so well said,
Mhm.
though. You're absolutely right, because there's no bar to keep you accountable if you are that supreme, right? I read where Justin Trudeau had basically said, we're the thing that we're proud to be as Canadians is that we're multicultural, and we're a nation of immigrants. That's kind of been a few of those pieces, right? So, which is a very nuanced statement to make. It's not that we're the supremo, burrito on the streeto, just right on the palate
Keep
of
rhyming,
country,
rhyming.
right? I know, right? This is a little rap. But there's also this idea with constructive patriotism. Can multiculturalism coexist with patriotism? Can you be an advocate for other cultures and allowing difference while also adhering or working towards kind of a common unified goal or idea or something that creates the nation? There's a very great article. It's called Do Patriotism and Multiculturalism Collide? And it's out of the Canadian Journal of Political Science, came out in 2012. And at this time, the pulse in Canada was that the Canadians, the research that they did, that in Canada, patriotic feelings were associated with a pro-immigrant sentiment. This idea that, we're actually proud that we are a nation of immigrants. We are actually proud that we reflect the whole world here. That was the pulse at that time. I think things have changed since 2012. 10 years ago. And this is the thing about a nation's identity, is that it does evolve. It does change, right? Where maybe in the 1900s, there was this very extreme, like, Canada must be this way. It must be European. It must be white. And any foreigner among us is in the labor force. They work, they're indentured servants, right? And then
unfortunately.
And then you had the Multiculturalism Act, which was a response actually to efforts in the House of Commons, where they wanted to make a bicultural country, just French or English. And so there was work to challenge that. And so that was with the Multiculturalism Act. So I don't know, what do you think, Hostion? I mean, as far as like multiculturalism and patriotism, do you think
of course
there's a relationship there?
Yeah, I think is, again, if go back to your that definition you have introduced to us about constructive patriotism, is about this attachment to a nation or a country. But if my attachment to the nation or the country is because of its multiculturalism, then I think that's where it overlaps, right? What I love is because it's diverse, it's multicultural, multicultural, and I can see that's one of the reasons that me and I believe many other Canadian immigrants share about our attachment to Canada, is because it allows us, as someone that's not white, that's not from a European culture, come here with my own sets of value, own sets of traditions, and can also be welcomed and celebrated with my expression. And I think that is why I love this country. Um, and that's, again, go back to multiculturalism.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a thread that a lot of immigrants still resonate with. I mean, I think both know that there's been a rise in anti-immigration and,
Oh, yeah.
anti-immigrant ideas, with the rise of maybe a more stronger nationalism coming out of, the southern neighbor, the United States.
Yeah.
I think that's leaking into Canada. But I would say that, yes, I think the multiculturalism that immigrants experience here is definitely a factor that makes them proud, right? Because
Hmm, hmm.
many other countries, at least countries that are more indigenous, it is, this is our culture, this is the way we do it, this is it. Whereas when you come to places that have been colonized, unfortunately, it is going to be more diverse. It is going to have a different expression. There's going to be people from all over informing and framing policies and ways of life. So just to kind of move a little bit forward, the pulse of immigration or immigrants and patriotism in Canada, we're going to sans Quebec. So Quebecans and Quebecois, we love you, but y'all are doing your own thing. And so that's a whole, we don't have
That's a
time to
very
talk about
different
Quebec,
Quebec.
unfortunately. But yes, so multiculturalism is important to Canadian national identity. It was there was another survey that came out of the Migration Policy Institute that says that Canadians who most strongly identify themselves as patriotic were also most supportive of immigration and multiculturalism.
Oh.
Again, this is also older data. So, and I looked for newer data and I couldn't find it, but there was a more recent data that came out, Stats Canada in June of last year, that said that immigrants have a higher sense of belonging to Canada than people born in Canada, with 77% reporting a very strong or somewhat strong sense of belonging compared to 70%. So a little bit higher than
Hmm,
people who
hmm.
are born here, right?
I think that makes sense. I think that
Yeah.
makes sense because many immigrants choose to live here.
They do. And I think
Yeah,
that's where this, and even I would say even refugees who come here. Now, I want to make a big disclaimer that everyone's experience is very different. And in no
very
way am I
different. Yeah.
trying to say that, well, all refugees think this way or all immigrants think this way. There's a lot of nuance and there's a lot of diversity in perspectives and lived experiences. But I do remember there was a gentleman, he was an Eritrean refugee, and he was telling me, Eritrea is my first life. And Canada is my second life. He just recalled how happy and thankful he was to be in Canada. That, and I said, yeah, but there's a lot of discrimination and racism. He said, but Andrea, I don't have a gun pointed to my head. I can express what I feel without fearing repercussions. He said,
Hmm,
it's nothing compared to the hell that I was living through. And,
hmm.
and so, that challenged me to just like, okay, well, I've got to hold everyone's perspectives openly and equally, because I don't think there's any one way to think about, I don't
Patriotism or
patriotism,
Canada.
or even to tell people who are immigrants or refugees, like, well, you need to be proud to be Canadian, like you
Yeah.
need to be a better patriot. I don't think that that's very patriotic in some ways, because
Yeah.
I think if we are looking at Canada through a multicultural and immigrant lens, then we do allow for the diversity of perspectives, and whether negative or positive, they're all
Hmm.
worth examining and making our more constructive patriotism to say, hey, there's something wrong about this system. We need to change it. We need to fix it.
Yeah. That actually reminds me, like a while ago, we had a meeting with Pride Society because Vancouver this year is hosting Canada Pride. It's like
Wow.
it's
It's
like the
going to be
Olympics, you know.
huge.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you just get somewhat extra funding from the federal government kind of thing, but we have to call it Canada Pride. We're like the hosting city in some sense. I think we're
Okay.
the third city or fourth city hosting it, doing it.
Okay. Okay.
So it's not like I have been doing for like many, many, many years. So but then anyway, I remember we were all together. So all the community like pride, our community member was sitting together discussing about the message about Canada Pride, what it is, and many people on the at the meeting have saying, "Oh, Canada, that word can be very charging, like emotionally charged for many people because Canada also in many ways is a colonial, colonial history about is genocide, is treatment to indigenous people, and a lot of problems, and in many ways it's not necessarily worth or deserving of the pride that we all celebrate as
I
queer,
see.
as the queer community, which
Yeah.
I completely understand them and I
Yeah.
100% agree what they said. But I remember when they saying all of that, me as an immigrant, I don't know actually how many immigrants was actually sitting in that room. I would say I'm one of the few. I
Okay.
think if maybe I'm wrong, but I would say I'm one of the few. I mean, I understand and I agree, but I'm also really proud of Canada. I also feel like I attribute part of my pride to myself to Canada because compared to where I was in China, I cannot even be who I am. I can even be queer and be gay and sit in this room and talk about how to be gay, how to celebrate gay with all of you. So Canada, in many ways, gave me the opportunity, that space to be proud of who I am. So I do want to celebrate that part of Canada Pride. But
Yeah.
yet that was not the
The
conversation that
sentiment.
was
Yeah.
that in that room. I
Mm.
think when we talk about being critical, we don't only talk about the dark side of things. We also have to celebrate the joy that we have. It doesn't
I
necessarily
agree.
always, yeah. I think without this darkness, we'll never realize how the sun can warm us and how the sun can make us feel. But sometimes we can also just be happy about the sun too.
Yeah, absolutely. I I remember I was sitting in a training with the Victoria Native Friendship Center. It was a community development program. It was a workshop, 3 days, 3 full days. And it was a mix of people in attendance. Some people were Indigenous, some people were Métis, many of us immigrants, or even just, people born and raised in Canada, very white, but wanting to be there, to grow and to be more aware of Indigenous communities and cultures and the history of Canada. And I remember meeting a gentleman, he was Métis, and he works for Victoria Police Department, actually. And,
Hmm.
we're talking about the Indian Act. And of course, we're just all sickened and appalled by it in the room.
Yeah,
And it
yeah.
was a very traumatic, it's a very traumatic history to remember. And I remember he said, I just want to say that I love Canada. I am proud to be Canadian, and I would say that I am a patriot. And I sat
Hmm.
there, a Métis man is saying this, and I'm just like, why? And he said, with everything that was all of with the uncovering of the mass graves, with the Truth and Reconciliation Act, he said, yes, we have a long way to go. But I am proud to be in a country that actually said something needs to be changed. And even though it's slow going, like progress is being made and work is being done. And that wouldn't be necessarily true in all countries.
Yes.
And so to your point, there is that darkness, but and that darkness is what we are constructive of. I
Yes.
think, as I said earlier, you can hold that construction and that fondness and that attachment in the same space.
I agree. I
They
agree.
don't always have to be diametrically opposed to each other.
I agree. And that's exactly how I sometimes like go back to that pride society conversation. That really good summary of how I felt when I was sitting in that boardroom is when they're criticizing all these things that Canada that did, and which is completely true. I also realized that, but also there's so much progress that we have made. Maybe
Yeah.
not is necessarily, yes, maybe this progress is made by the Canadians, all of us together make this progress. And we're all under this umbrella of Canadian. Maybe you can identify or not, but we are in many ways this space, this land, indigenous land had put us together to work on these things together, and then we all put under the umbrella of the Canadian, and we did it. We did something. And something that liberates a lot of people. It might not be perfect, and nothing will ever be perfect, but at least at some moment we get to just sit, can just enjoy that progress we made, and then maybe the next step we can continue to criticize what can still be made, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Because I think it is that knowing what has happened and not wanting it to happen again, that's what keeps us working hard to make those differences, but also to enjoy that. You know, it was the Angus Reid Institute back in 2016. Actually, they surveyed immigrants in Canada and just their overall satisfaction. A large majority said that they would feel more Canadian if they could buy a house, which I thought was an interesting statistic. But again, this identity with land, you know, and location, their actual satisfaction with life and their community in Canada was higher than Canadian-born people. And so I feel like there is a sense of optimism that we come with. And there's also the sense of, you know, it's not easy especially for people of color, especially for immigrants of color. It's not easy because of the racial stereotypes, the oppression, the discrimination. But there still is, and it can vary from generation to generation, but there still is a love and almost a kind of a sense of pride to be where they are. And people don't take that lightly, right?
I definitely don't take my rights or my position here in Canada lightly. I mean, not to, because I think my place here right now is generation of the making, not just my family generation or my effort, it's also the Chinese immigrant here before me, the Chinese Exclusion Act, all the Chinese community had that, all the fight that they have fought, all the triumph they made. I'm here is also a sum and a representation of all their effort. And sometimes I just want to hold those close to myself and enjoy it for a little bit, not to think about necessarily, you know, the struggle, but enjoy their joy, enjoy their triumph. Yes.
I think patriotism can look many different ways to many different people, you know, like for the history of your ancestors, right, that came here, and knowing what that was, and seeing their resilience and their ways that they changed history for you. You can hold both of those spaces, and that's not a lot of things that I think people can do, or maybe are in a place yet that they can do, depending on where they're at. But yeah, I think it can encompass a lot of things. And as long as we give space for people to express that in the way that they need to, whether they're like, you know, I'm not proud to be Canadian, you know, or
and that's okay
I really
too.
that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that's totally okay.
And I think that's part of, in my mind, being a constructive patriot, is saying that, you know, that yeah, you can have that experience, you can have that opinion, you can hold your devotion to the country, you can cherish where you live. That's okay too, right? So I just want to end real quick with a very short clip. It's from CBC Comedy, and it's Leonard Chan. I discovered him in my research, and he actually talks about Canadian patriotism as a Chinese Canadian immigrant. So I'm just going to load this up here and play it.
I love Canada, but I'm not American about it, you know? Because Americans are obnoxiously patriotic. They need you to know that they're American, right? But Canadians, like, we're proud to be Canadian, but part of being Canadian is that, especially as a child of an immigrant, we never forget who we are, all right? I think that is really the difference between our two countries. And I think here's an example to illustrate the difference, all right? I was recently in Europe. I was at the airport. I was in line to board my flight. And this woman wearing a shirt made out of a US flag and a hat that said, "Make America Great Again," which were both probably made in China. She cuts in front of me in line, right? But I'm a Canadian, so I don't say anything. She gets on the plate in front of me. She's got 3 bags. She puts them in the overhead compartment. There's no room for my stuff, but I'm a Canadian, so I don't say anything. And then she gets in the seat right in front of me, reclines the seat the whole way right in my face. But I'm a Canadian, so I don't say anything. But because I'm Chinese, I passive-aggressively kneed her in the back for the entire flight.
Oh, but yeah, this idea that, it was a few episodes ago, but this idea of our identity as immigrants, I think many of us hyphenate who we are, right?
Yeah.
I'm not Canadian. Maybe I'm Chinese Canadian, or I'm Brazilian Canadian. I'm Libyan, Canadian. That hyphen brings both together. And we can be proud of both identities coexisting in one body and in one time and space. So
I think that's also the intersectionality
yes.
of, like, it's a really good illustration of intersectionality about how the part of you, the Canadian part of you, dictates how you behave in certain situation, but then how other identity of yours also comes out and dictate
Right.
how other action you do.
Right.
I think it's perfect. That joke is perfect illustration. In such a funny way.
It is. Recommend it. Leonard Chan, everyone. So, but thank you, Hoshin, for this conversation. I mean, typically we have like a, kind of an encouragement at the end. I think this was more of just kind of a topic to really think about and to just talk about. I don't think there's any clear conclusion or way forward other than,
I think people should, just sit down and sit with themselves.
Have a seat.
Have a seat. You have to have a seat. Take a deep breath.
Ground yourself for a bit.
And then remember your foot have to touch the ground. Just to make sure.
Do some somatic breathing.
You connect with the universe.
Yeah.
And then to think about what it means to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
How you, the aspects that you love, the aspects that you don't love, and how you see yourself in terms of identifying as a patriot, or maybe you don't. But then how that dictate what all of that means to you, and how you view this world and this country that you live in.
Yeah. I appreciate that. I have nothing to add. I mean, I think I'm still trying to understand patriotism through a Canadian lens. And it's really hard just because of the
American
the
education.
Big loud voice at the southern tip. So anyway, but we're going to do our Canadian salad pop quiz.
Yay!
Yes. So Hoshin, since you haven't been prepped on this question,
I will ask first.
You will ask first. Yes.
I'll ask the question first. Okay. My question, it's a bit difficult, I would say.
They're always difficult.
No.
They are.
No, don't say that.
Okay.
No. Okay. The question is, how many Canadian you think would believe that they actually know the words of the anthem, "Oh Canada"?
Oh.
How many people you think?
Percentage of Canadians that actually
that think, that
they
believe
know the words.
that they know the words.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm going to say 40%.
40%.
Yes.
40% final answer?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, the answer is about 3/4.
Oh, 75. Okay.
So 75.
Well,
many Canadians actually know that.
If you took that question in the U.S., it would be 150,000%. They know it forward and backward. So okay, 75%. No, that's pretty good. Actually, my question is also tied to the national anthem. You might know this answer to this question. It's true or false.
Okay, go on.
Okay, true or false? The word patriot is used in the national anthem, "O Canada."
False.
Is that your final answer?
Yes.
It's true.
Oh, I don't know.
It's the second line. So yeah, it's "O Canada, our home." It should be changed to "on native land."
Native
That's
land,
my opinion. The second line is "true patriot love
Oh,
and all of
true
us
patriot.
command." Yes.
See, I don't know my.
Yeah, there wasn't
I
a
don't know
question
the
on your
word.
citizenship test?
No, see, I'm one of the quarter, 1/4 of those people that does not know the words.
You are 1/4.
Of those people. Because 1/4 of people does not know their words, right? I'm
That's
one of
true.
those.
That's true. Hoshin, way to represent. I'm really proud of you.
1% of 1/4, the minorities, always.
Oh gosh. So anyway, but yeah, that's the quiz. That's the show. Please definitely stay tuned next week. We're going to talk about something that I know very little about.
I
Okay.
still have to do a lot of research on it.
Okay.
But yeah, we're gonna talk about the ballroom culture.
Ballroom culture. Ooh, and this for people who are very, well, ignorant like me. We're not talking about ballroom as in like you wear fancy clothes
Salsa,
and
yeah,
you
like
go
salsa.
dancing and that's it, right? We're
Yeah,
talking something
ballroom
very different.
culture, yeah, is like if you have watched any TV shows like Pose, Legendary, those are the shows that actually portray a part of ballroom culture, or like even Madonna's song Vogue,
Okay.
or Beyonce's new-ish album now,
Okay.
Renaissance. They're all part of ballroom culture. I will not give more. You
Okay.
want to know
You
more,
just have to
listen to the
listen. You have to
episode.
listen.
You have
Yes,
to listen to the episode.
absolutely.
Yeah.
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 We are expanding. So, well, we're expanding on some social media. So we're on TikTok. I'm learning how to use TikTok. I have no idea how to use it. But I'm like, no, let's get us out there. So we're on TikTok. We are going to start uploading our episodes on YouTube. Whether it's video or not, that's to be determined, whether this old lady can determine what that looks like. But also, we are starting a newsletter so that you'll hear updates from us once a month about the latest episodes. And it'll be an opportunity for you to not only stay connected with us, but also to weigh in and see what kinds of topics you want to talk about or sharing your story. So stay tuned for that. Go to our website and sign up for our newsletter. We want to keep connected with you. So thanks for joining us. And
What is our website's address?
oh, yes. If you're new to our podcast, it's canadiansalad.ca.
Exactly.
Thanks for joining us and for inviting us into your lives for 30 minutes. And we will talk to you next week.
I'll talk to you next week.
Bye.
Canadian Salad is written and produced in British Columbia, Canada by Hostion and Andrea McCoy. Theme music is by Naver Avetyan from Pixabay.
This has been a good Janklin production.